I think the death of the used car market is upon us. I mean, let's think about this for a second. You bought a used car 20 years ago, you could probably fix it. There was lots of little shops around, you could get parts pretty easily, parts were cheap. And even if you couldn't work on your own stuff, things were pretty easy to access. There was always a backyard mechanic that was willing to work on your old Ford or Honda or Toyota or whatever it is. And so things were affordable. Lots of backyard mechanics, cheap parts. It was pretty obvious. But wait a minute. Things have been changing. Have you not noticed a very, very peculiar kind of trend here? What's going on in the market is this overcomplication of things. I mean, we think about what the market's all about now in developing these new technologies, new cars. You know, I would consider myself a strong DIYer. I'm pretty good at do-it-yourself repair work. You know, I know already there are some states and there are some jurisdictions that are already frowning on people doing their own work because they're saying and they're advocating because the mechanics need more work and they're advocating for the fact that, hey, a do-it-yourself or backyard mechanic guy, he's not trained, he's not certified. Who gives him the right to change brakes? Brakes are the only thing stopping you and stopping that 4,000-pound machine from running into something. Well, those are valid points. But I mean, I've seen, I've experienced some of the worst mechanics that money can possibly buy. Now, while there's some absolutely amazing mechanics, they know a lot. And I'll be quite honest, that's what they go to school for and they do it every day. So we have to put faith in some of the mechanics that do the work on our cars, that they're going to do the right thing. But buying a used car is not the same thing anymore because now a lot of these mechanics that we're finding have to go to school longer. It's no longer a 3-year, 4-year apprenticeship. Now they have to go to specialized schooling, sometimes have to fly overseas, have to get more training, more in-depth training, and also more understanding on more complicated diagnostic equipment. So they have to get trained on the new technology, the new equipment. So where does that leave the rest of us? Well, we're buying products and we go about our daily business buying these new cars and thinking nothing of it. You know, every year there's some new technology, some new big screens and hybrid drive and electrification. And, you know, now we're up to what, 800 volts DC or some thereabouts on some of these EV systems, on the high power systems. A lot of that so it's faster charging, provides better performance electrically. But clearly it creates a whole new set of hazards. You know, back in the day, when I used to work on my cars, and I still do, internal combustion vehicles, I've been working on this crap for years. You know, I look at this piece of shit and I grab a wrench and I know exactly what to do with it. I know if I need a 3/8 wrench, half inch, 5 mil, 10 millimeter, I know what I gotta buy, what I need, and I probably already have a whole pile of tools in my toolbox. See, I can get to work, I can get busy, and I can go down to the local do-it-yourself kind of parts store and get some of those parts myself. Kind of. See, but that's where things are changing. And what I've seen here recently, and this is where I truly believe the used car market is dying. I mean, we're seeing a lot of these wholesalers, the CarMax, Carvanas, kind of getting on board and you know, offering up used cars for whatever price they feel is justified and vindicated the market can bear. And that's all well and good. But on the backside, you also have manufacturers continually trying to sell new products. See, because they make money in a couple of big ways. Well, 3 big ways. One is selling you widgets and paint PPF and undercoating and all that garbage. Other ones are they're making profits on the front end by the sales of new cars. And if they're research and development, they have to create these new cars and technology, they have to pay for it somehow, and they have to continue selling these new vehicles. That's how the OEMs do it. But at the franchise level, see, the OEMs don't make money and kick back so much for repairing those used cars. They make money off of creating some new technology, putting their markups, getting tight and aggressive on supply chain costs, and of course selling you the latest and greatest, the new technology, try to outdo their neighbors. See, but the dealers and some of these small shops are the ones dealing with the used cars. So that leads us to the fact that it looks like the used car market is eventually going to die. And the reason I say that, it's coming from a place of, I know how to work on my stuff. A lot of you do too, but some of you don't. And see, that's the thing. What we're finding now is all of this new technology. You're becoming much more advanced in being, or having to become much more advanced in, working on this new tech, on these new cars, on this overcomplicated technology. If I drove my brand new EV into Joe's garage just down the alley, he'll look at it, he'll give his head a shake and sorry, that's a hands off for me, I'm good. Not only A, he doesn't know what to do, B, he doesn't have the technology, and C, he's scared of it because now you've got high voltage, you've got other issues, batteries, stored charge that you can't deal with. See, when you work on some of the internal combustion vehicles like we all have, you kind of know what the conventional hazards are, right? You got stored energy like springs, struts, shocks, things like that. Some of the high pressure systems also have stored energy of pressurized systems. You know how to bleed that down, brakes. There are systems, hydraulics, pneumatics, spring tension. There's things that you just know. And after years and decades of people hurting themselves, we realize that, okay, I won't put my finger there. See, that's one of the wins, is we already know by other people losing fingers. Then, of course, there's other things. We learn, there's books, you go all over social media, check out YouTube. It's the favorite place if you want to DIY some of your great used car, because there's lots of great how-to and DIYs on there. But what's starting to happen now is that old-fashioned 4-cylinder engine that has a little torque converter auto on it, that a lot of the older cars you'd see from every brand, those are going away. And so what you're not seeing on a lot of these videos are the ability to work on hybrid systems, electrified systems. No, rather now you're seeing these OEMs sort of like hog tie you to actually utilizing their own service. See, it's almost like becoming a sort of, you're pulling that in almost to the point where these dealers, these OEMs, with their specific training, their one-off test equipment that you can't get anywhere, means that they're really holding you by the short and curlies when it comes time to work on your car. That's right. If I look at a new electric car, there's no way I'm even going to think about working on anything on that. I have no idea. I know that they're stored charge. I know they're heavy, so I'm even a little skeptical to work on suspension systems. But at this point, I think this is what's starting to happen in the automotive sector. And why I think the death of the used car means that a lot of us are no longer going to be able to work on used cars. As these new cars that we're looking at today are advancing in their complicated technology and their features, EVs, hybrids, and all of this integration of new tech is far too complicated for this cowboy. So rather, what you're getting now is a situation where you got no choice, man. Like, let's be honest. Where are you going to take your EV? Well, if you got a Tesla, you're going to call Tesla. If you got an EV and it's a Hyundai, you're probably going to go to the dealer. You have no idea what you're doing. I don't. And so what that means is now is what we're looking at, the new release of this technology today is tomorrow's used cars. You see, why do you think the used car market is struggling on EVs? Well, part of it is, people just aren't always on board with EVs, and we've heard the ups and downs, very polarizing. Some people love it and some people don't. Some people say, yeah, I need to do it for the green and grass, and others say, you know what, I don't have to do more oil changes anymore in my old car and I like it. And everybody has their own sort of reason, but one thing for sure, why some people are not buying used EVs is because they're not the initial early adopters. But more importantly, the concern about batteries, the degradation, the extreme weather conditions that it's having on these batteries. But honestly, it's bigger than that. It really is. It's the proverbial black box. It's what's inside that counts, that you just don't have a goddamn clue on how to fix any of that crap. See, what people are worried about is, sure, Tesla might give you an 8 or a 10-year warranty on the batteries, and you might get a pretty good drivetrain. But think about the drivetrain warranty. But think about this for a sec. Some of the other OEMs is less, might be 8 years or less for their battery and electric motor warranties. Okay, so somebody buys that car, they drive it. You think, okay, Tesla's been out for a while. I think of the original Tesla Model S. Great bang for buck. But you think about it. Who's working on that? Just Tesla. Also think about why they're not selling that well and while they're almost giving them away. Why? Well, the batteries, if you're only warranted for 8 or 10 years, so what does that mean if you've got a vehicle that's already 8 or 10 years old? What do you think that consumer's worried about? Troubleshooting, diagnostics, expensive battery replacement costs? Sure, all of the above. But they also don't have a clue on how to work on this stuff. And see, what we're seeing now in today's automotive space is this increasing level of complication in the technology that means forget it. Rather, a lot of people are making a decision to lease their new cars. Buying seems to be less and less of an option for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people buy so they can trade it in and have a little bit of that built-in equity, but there's very few people that truly buy a car today with the intention to say, you know what, I'm going to keep this car for 20 years. You know, you think back to a Honda or even a Toyota Camry back in, say, 2005, 2010, people quite often bought those cars with the full intention that they were going to run the wheels off it. They were going to buy it new, watch it depreciate over the years, year over year, just do your maintenance, and you know what, maybe after 20, 25 years, they'd hand it off to their grandkid. That's the way we used to look at it. And it was easy to fix. Because once it ran out of warranty after 3 years, who cares? Brakes are easy, oil changes are simple, and it's a simple car to work on. But wait a minute. It's not like that anymore. Even Toyota's all hybrid. Everybody's talking about going EV and hybrid tech. Where is the future? Well, it's not fixing it and making it last for 25 years. I'll tell you that for free. Now people buy it only with the intention on maybe owning it for 5 years and then trading it in and having some inherent equity built into it so that you pay for it for, the course of the loan term, and after 5 years you decide I'm going to trade it off. You paid 50, it might be worth, 18 right now, or say $20,000. Then you go and you buy your next car. You say, hey, I've got 20,000, but they hack you down like a bunch of hack stars that they are. And they say, well, we'll give you 15 on a trade-in for that car. But at least you feel like, okay, I've still got some inherent equity that I can trade in. Whereas people that are leasing these cars, it's basically a rental. And you're also limited by mileage. You're limited by damage, wear and tear. You can't modify it. So a lot of times leases work for business owners, but not everybody wants a lease. But fewer and fewer people are buying cars with the intention of keeping it for 25 years because they're too complicated. So where does it leave all of these abandoned used cars? See, what we're looking at right now is we're hearing it. I mean, CarMax, Carvana, some of them are struggling and some of them are having banner years. But the point I'm trying to make is a lot of these vehicles are still sort of yesterday's technology. Early generation hybrids, most of these vehicles that are selling are still more or less internal combustion. Well, vehicles like Teslas are on the market and some people are buying them. There's far fewer people interested in buying a Tesla or a used EV, and therefore you're seeing these prices crash on used electric vehicles. Nobody wants them. Those that want an EV will buy them new. Unfortunately, the tax credits are gone, so that's why we're seeing this big slump in sales. But at the end of the day, once we've moved this whole needle down, this whole assembly line of sorts, or this whole waiting line of used vehicles that are kind of moving from EV or moving from internal combustion to hybrids to finally EVs, once they've all filtered through the system, once we're looking at knocking on the back door of what looks to be the future in 2030, 35, we know the mandates are out there. What does the future of owning those used cars look like? I don't know. Looks a little grim, don't you think? And I don't mean to paint a negative picture because I've always been a big advocate for buying slightly used cars, buying a car that's 3 years old, get it slightly out of warranty, and then you can get like a, 40, 50, 60% discount. And I love that. And I think that's huge value in doing it that way. But even I am a little concerned with what I'm looking at in the future because now I start to think, okay, in 10 years from now, when we're looking at 2035 and almost every country is talking about mandating it to pure electric vehicles, zero emissions, I can't help but think the trailing effect of that, the natural lag a couple years later, all you have are EVs How are you going to own that outside of warranty period? Well, you could take a chance, roll a dice, and hope for the best. And a lot of people do, and they don't even think twice about it. But there are a lot of people that are skeptical. And if you think things are complicated today, you wait. They're only going to get worse. So as we look down to the future, what the used car market looks like, it's still reasonably decent today. That's why the used car market's so hot. Why do you think it's so hot? Why do you think the Carvanas and CarMaxes have been doing as well as they have, or the secondary franchise dealers are doing so well? Well, it's largely because there's a lot of ICE cars kicking around yet, and people are still buying and they're moving and they're shaking, and these cars you can still kind of work on. But that's all changing, you see. And as we transition further down the future, there'll be less and less interest in buying these vehicles that are far too complicated. And that's why I say, I think the future for used cars is not what it is today. There'll be less and less interest in buying used cars, and we're going to have this massive flood of hybrids and electric vehicles. And while some people are willing to take that chance, many aren't. And so the transition guaranteed, what I'm looking at, is people are going to be more inclined to lease, short-term lease, finance maybe short-term with an expectation of a trade-in if they can see that that OEM has a strong residual historically, and that they know that there's a strong history of that brand taking in trades. People will take those sorts of chances. But at the end of the day, more and more people will transition to more of a rental, a borrowing, a short-term lease, as it were. And the used car market will flood and flood and flood. And when we also ask the question, and I've asked this question, I want to share that video over there about where do brand new cars go that don't sell. I've also got another video about where used cars go that don't sell, because that's a big problem. That's going to be a bigger and bigger problem. Do they go to scrap? Do they get chucked? Do they get disassembled? Do they get set back on the parts shelves? I don't know. Let's talk and wait for the future. Anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. And again, as always, have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye-bye.